everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. Today we have George Kindler, who is the writer of this book, A Golden Civilization, the Map of Mindfulness. So welcome.
Hi there. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So I wanted to first start off with getting a sense of how you started even writing this book. What was the genesis of this book?
Yeah, well, it actually began a long time ago, CJ. It began coming out of the financial crisis in
Mm-hmm.
2008. And as you know, my professional background is in the financial services industry. So when the crisis hit, you might be surprised. I mean, I wasn't invested in any of the stuff, but I took it extremely personally.
Oh,
That there was this collapse, a huge recession, that there was massive mis-selling of products all over the world, and that people were losing their retirement savings.
oh.
Uh, so I felt I took it personally. I thought I'd worked in the industry for 40 years trying to make a difference, trying to make it honest and full of integrity and authenticity, compassion and good character. And and here it was. This was this was what we'd come to. So I started the book then, and I started off writing it as a banking manifesto.
But wait,
Because
I'm curious. So you took it personally. So I'm one of the things an Enneagram 8, and so guilt is the one thing that I suffer with. So for me, taking it personal, will be like, oh, it's all my fault. What was it for you when you said you took it personally? I don't understand how you could take something external to yourself personally.
yeah, great question. So I felt devastated. I thought my thinking process was, what on earth have I done with my life?
Oh, like, oh, look who I've been hanging out with, these scoundrels.
Well, but I've wasted my life. I've tried all my life to bring integrity into the financial industry.
I
And
see. Okay.
this is what happens at the end of my career. So I got on a mission. I'd written a bunch of books, as you know already, and I thought I must not have said it all. So I started off, I said, I'm going to say it all.
And it's interesting because as I was reading through some of the ideas in this book, they're kind of soup, simple human truths. I mean, they're just divine truths. I guess I would say, having read a ton of spiritual books, a lot of these things are just um, kind of clearly what we want. I think everyone would want the world to be. We don't even know that we want the world to be. But before we get into that, um, I wanted to talk to you about. So your background is mindfulness, and
Yes.
and in this book, I don't know if you can see it on page 34 that I'm showing to the people on YouTube. You have a description of the map of mindfulness, and I found this to be fascinating. Would you mind stepping me through what the heck this even is and how? Because I assume here's how I assume, like, with any manifesto, right? There's a fundamental view and presuppositions that that manifesto is built off of, and
Right.
so yours. I don't know. Would you say the foundation of yours is the bedrock is mindfulness? And if so, then I think us understanding the genesis is really understanding that map. Is that fair
Yes.
to say?
That's fair to say, and it's complex. It's complex to describe. So I'll describe it in
And I'll
the.
point to where you're showing to describe it.
Great. So one of my realizations was that we have this grid of space and time. The way we think of
Mhm,
space and time is that it goes out over a huge period of space and also details of time. So we've
mhm,
seen that on science programs, right? You've
mhm,
seen something like that as a map of the universe. Well, gosh, think about where it is that you feel free and how it is the moments that you feel free. So I've got a trick question for everybody, and that is, have you ever felt a moment of freedom? In the past, sometime. You walk on the beach, making love, creating something magnificent, spending time with your kids. Have you ever felt a moment of freedom in the past? And everybody says yes, and
mhm,
I go, yeah, got it wrong.
mhm.
None of us have ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past. The only time we've ever experienced freedom is in the present moment.
Mm.
And when I realized that, at first that seems really like obvious, so simple. What are you talking about, George? What it made me realize is that our map makes the present moment almost insignificant, the map of the universe. The
Mm-hmm.
present moment is tiny in there. So I thought, how do we create a map where the present moment is at the center of everything?
Mm.
And we see that time and space actually arises out of the present moment. So that was the genesis of it. And there are other things. I'm sure you're familiar. You've heard of the study. Do you know the study that Daniel Gilbert and Matthew Killingsworth did on happiness?
No, no, tell me.
Wonderful. So they designed an iPhone app, and they gave it to people in 82 countries all over the world, and people of all ages. And that app periodically throughout your day would ping you.
Mm.
And when it did, it would ask you three really simple questions. First of all, are you happy or unhappy?
Mm-hmm.
Yes or no. Are you happy or not? All right. Second question, are you focused on what you're doing? Are you present or not?
Mm-hmm.
And the third question was, what are you doing? So you would think that if you were coming home from a 10-hour day, you still had to prepare dinner, finish the
Right.
laundry, take out the garbage. Compared to someone lying on the beach in Maui, you'd be unhappy and they'd be happy.
Right.
But there's no correlation. The correlation is, are you present or not? The people who are present and focused, who are in the present moment, are happy. So I thought, we're looking at trying to bring freedom into people's lives and happiness. We need a map that shows us how, that shows the present moment as being at the center of that. So that's the top half of that map. If you show that map, that's the top half of the map.
Right.
And then the bottom half is, it turns out that when you practice mindfulness, which is a practice that goes again and again and again back to the present moment, that what happens when you get quiet in there is that you're actually developing what I call virtues.
Hmm.
You're developing, you can experience great spirit, you can experience God, but you're developing things like patience, kindness, empathy, compassion. And so I just realized that if we shifted the map and we made the present moment at the center of the universe, and we actually encouraged people to go there to find freedom, that the practice of mindfulness would actually develop both a greater alertness and awakening, but also more virtue. And when you're trying to cure civilization's ills, virtue is really helpful.
Mm. Okay, so go ahead.
No. I think that's a general description.
Okay. Okay, so let me see if I can recap. Oddly
Uh,
enough, as if the universe were playing a practical joke on me, while we were talking, I've had text after text asking me to respond,
oh, no.
ironically, making me less present
Yeah.
and not allowing me to experience any of these things. Um,
Yes.
but what I'm hearing you say is that we actually think of things in terms of space and time. Even our happiness is considered even our happiness. We actually think of something in the past that made us happy, but really, we're really happy when we're present, and we're really happy when we are kind of a mindful presence of things. And I guess I don't understand what the difference between being present and mindful is. What's the difference?
Yeah. No, I think they're very related. Mindfulness, of course, is a practice. It's a meditative practice of returning to the present moment again and again. We can, in simple ways, you and I, like the text that just came in, you can be mindful just in our daily encounters, but or in your washing the dishes, or getting into the car and driving somewhere. But the practice of mindfulness is a practice that focuses on returning again and again and again and again and again to the present moment.
Mm.
So what that does something very special. It actually develops two things. One is it develops more and more alertness and awakeness and engagement and quickness of mind. Makes us smarter, actually, a lot of studies show.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that it does is because we all know that meditation also lessens your stress and brings you quiet. So it also brings you into this space where we are naturally kinder, more virtuous, more generous.
Mm.
So what I realized is just shifting the map. If we can start thinking about the present moment as being really what life is about. And yes, time and space is still there. We still need to go to the grocery store. We still
Right.
need to make dinner later in the day. We still need to plan. That's useful. But the present moment is where where we really find freedom, and which if we cultivate it, we can both find much more freedom and happiness in our life, and also much more virtue. And
Mm.
this is very useful if we're going to actually make a golden civilization.
Ah, okay. So golden civilization is a civilization based on the idea that, and actually, here's another map that you created. George,
Great.
what is in your mind? For someone
Pretty
who's so
wild,
empty, your mind is full of these maps.
huh?
Tell me about what this map is.
Well, it's very similar. And another way of thinking, of time and space and how we think of things like the texts coming in,
Mhm.
or like all the things that you and I schedule to make. I mean, we're busy. We
Mhm.
lead busy lives. Well, that's all time and space.
Mhm.
And we know that the more that we are in that and are obsessed with that and preoccupied with that, the more stressed we feel.
Yes, I was
The
feeling stressful during all the text
I
messages.
know. I felt bad for you. You're just getting into to work. You're late, 5 minutes late, and you're getting all these texts. Oh my. Um,
And I'm
but
making mistakes right and left. Not good,
oh,
but what can I
oh,
say?
you
Okay,
can't,
so
you can't-
all right, so this is the mind. This is kind of where this is kind of my operating. Here's CJ. She just this is time and space, the world in which most of us are operating in.
right, right,
Okay.
right. And we all have encounters with the present moment, but one of the things I argue is that most of those encounters we're kind of unconscious. We're acting on automatic pilot.
Right.
And in that world of unconsciousness, we have an unconscious democracy, we have an unconscious civilization, we have an unconscious economy.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things create trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So my part of this notion of a golden civilization is for all of us to be more awake and more engaged, more clear, more at ease
Mm.
in all of those things.
Mm. Okay, and then the bottom part is this is kind of the state that we find ourselves in. This is kind of the idealized state when we are doing the things that you mentioned, that we're more mindful, we are more infinite, we are more eternal versus kind of CJ has to go meet with George. She's 5 minutes late. She's getting text messages, right? That's the you talk about it as opening and closing. So you move from a mindfulness contemplative practice, which I was actually surprisingly the most calm I've ever been. I did say to my husband as he was driving back, Mike, is this the shortest route? And he's like, really? And I said, and then I was like, okay, there's nothing you can do to control this situation. You can't make the traffic go away.
Yeah,
You can just be calm. And
yeah,
then there's this entrepreneurial spirit in creating, which is also part of, there's this kind of, you know, things are arising and then you're creating in this presence. And so is that what this entrepreneurial?
yes,
Okay.
entrepreneurial spirit, and in a way, what's there is very important as well. Most of us live our life in relation to kind of the government
Mm-hmm.
or big corporations, and we
Right.
feel disempowered.
Mm-hmm.
They've got all the power, and when we think about the problems in the world, whether it's war or climate or inequality or whatever, we go, well, I'm just a small cog. What can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And my notion is that that's almost like a codependence. It's almost like alcoholism,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore we're robbed of our energy. So one of the things in the book I write about is that our vitality is entrepreneurial. we're naturally out there to make a difference. We want to make change, and we want it to be impactful and good. And so the more that we practice meeting the present moment, the more alert we are, the more confidence we have, the more skillful we are in any situation. So one of the things I argue for is that we want to strengthen our entrepreneurial spirit, which is our vitality, which is our drive for freedom, passion for living. And so that also is part of this shift.
Okay, I get it. Yeah. So in some ways, I can say for myself, there have been zombie-like moments, right, where you're just kind of going through the motions of things, and there's a point in which you are feeling free, passionate, excited, and that's where that kind of energy that's generated makes a whole world of difference in everything, quality, intention, delivery, everything.
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
you're in a different world,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Uh,
All right. Now there's seven integrities that you talk about, and these are things that are kind of foundational things. Uh, and I wanted to talk. There are seven systems or integrities critical for a golden civilization, and we mentioned a couple of them already. It's like a democracy, um, a market. These seven integrities. So tell me how this fits in with your model.
Yeah, so fantastic. So once we understand that we need more spirit, if you think about a golden civilization, we've been giving conversations all over the world about this, CJ. It's been really interesting, holding
Yeah.
kind of conversations, and we ask the audience, which is sometimes 5 people and sometimes it's 1,000 people, and we ask them to design with us what a golden civilization looks like.
Mm.
They design it, and it's the same. It's kindness, it's collaboration, it's greater equality, it's all the freedoms of democracy, it's a vitality, it's creativity. It's all the things it's authenticity, it's empathy and yeah. So it's all the things that you would expect, and so they start a lot of the shift that we understand to get to a golden civilization requires a shift inside ourselves. And then a lot of it, we look outside and we know that there's something wrong with our political world. There's something wrong with our economic world, or we wouldn't have this kind of distrust all the way through.
Right.
So what I'm doing is trying to go, okay, let's do both. And let's do it. And let's do it in a hurry. Let's do it in this generation. Let's
Right.
make it happen, the whole
Right.
thing.
Right.
So the seven integrities are an attempt to pull out what are the major themes. I think you might think differently. You might shift one for another, whatever. But basically, I've got roughly half of them in democracy, half of them in economics. I've got leadership, I've got entrepreneurial spirit, and I've got media in there.
Yep.
And my thought is that from the external, the structural standpoint, we need to look at each of those and let's make them ideal. Let's not, compromise. Let's not tweak it this way or that way.
Right.
That's been going on for decades.
Right.
It's time to get our world together so that it is really working. One of the metaphors I use is the Cassini satellite. Do you know what that?
No.
So that's a satellite that shoots out from planet Earth out to Saturn's rings, and it sends back these wonderful images. So if you missed, if the trajectory were off by just a couple of inches for every mile that they send that Cassini satellite, would it get there? No, it would never get to Saturn's rings. So, and NASA has a word for that perfection of trajectory. And the word they use is integrity. So if we can have that kind of integrity with a satellite, a weapon basically going out to Saturn, why can't we design a system where we have that kind of integrity in our political and economic worlds as well, and then insist upon it? And I think we can. And I think it's time. And I think if we don't, then we face the kinds of ongoing wars and climate issues and surveillance and all the things we worry about. There's no reason to be worried about those things if we come together as a democracy.
Right. Okay. So let's actually take let's just take one that is I would say the most simple of the models. And since we're talking on YouTube, it's media. So the freedoms that you have in here are freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of transparency, truth, and accuracy. And the integrity is that the structure and systems that guarantee our ability to trust that the press is not dominated by the government or corporations or other wealthy or powerful interests. Scientific, investigative, and reportive standards are in place for the accuracy and unbiased nature of its news. We can rely on media to inform our best lives and for democracy to make the best decisions. The integrity of media includes our ability to trust its dedication to the integrity, values, freedoms, and principles of a golden civilization. So this is an example of one of the integrities, and you talk about kind of the tenets, the freedoms that we must actually so going back to this model of being mindful, it's like being mindful. I'm trying to map this all together. So being mindful that we have like a media, even if it's outside, it's like, is our media like freedom of, is there a freedom of transparency, truth, and accuracy? How would I use this model in my, so what you're saying is I want to affect my internal world and I also want to affect my external world, and sometimes we feel disempowered. So if we take media, what would I do with this?
Yeah, fantastic. So first of all, I think it's really valuable to understand. And one of the things that we haven't understood, we've thought that that a free press is simply free from the propaganda of government. Mm-hmm. But in fact, a free press has to be free of all forms of propaganda. So because otherwise it's not free. It's being dominated by one force or another. We have now in America and in the world, and just take America, we have many corporations and nonprofits that are as powerful as the American government was when they first set up the freedom of the press in the 18th century. So we need to know that the press is free of all of those undue influences. Right. And we don't. And that's one of the reasons when you look at surveys of trust, they're not quite as distrusted as financial advisors and not quite as distrusted as politicians, but they're not trusted. Journalists aren't trusted. So so the first thing is just to be aware of that, and then to begin to insist in all of your communications and that we create that free press, because without it, we don't know what they're telling us is true. So we don't know how to vote. We don't know how to make decisions about the climate. We don't know how to make decisions about war. And we don't know how to make decisions about our own spiritual life, our own freedoms, because they could just be selling us products or selling us government propaganda. So these are very important standards. And then what we do, I think, as citizens, is that we simply speak out on these things. One of the things that I've done, as I mentioned, is I've set up, and people can find this on our website, agoldencivilization.com. It has to have an A at the beginning. But we're setting up conversations all over the world, trying to create a participative democracy where people get together and think, is media the issue we want to fight or engage around? Or is homelessness? Right. Or is, war or earth dangers? Or what is it that we want to do? Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Or so you're in our spirits.
Okay, got it. So in this case, this was your kind of like, hey, if we actually were to pull several levers that would make a huge difference on our societal environment as well as on our internal environment, these are the levers that you would pull. And this is your initial take on like, hey, I'm just one guy sitting here getting teed off about stuff. Full of love, but also like, can we just agree on the following? Freedom of press, freedom of speech, truth, accuracy, transparency. This seems, to me, I read them like, yeah, it seems obvious, but we forget. Like, I mean, it's you read and go, oh yeah, of course. And then you're like, yeah, but I don't
Yeah.
know if I all the time am demanding this as a reader. Nor am I understanding that what I'm watching may actually be biased in several
Right.
different ways. Like when I read the
Yeah.
New York Times, it's biased just as much as the Washington Post, just as much as the Wall Street Journal, just as much as Fox News, CNN. It all has kind of inherent
Yes.
bias associated with it. But being an educated consumer, knowing that it has an inherent bias, and then coming up with your conclusions yourself, I think, based
Yeah.
on them.
I think, and that's where we are. Is that we are educated consumers, and we try to come up with our best filtering of who they are. But I'm not sure that that's sustainable, CJ.
Hmm.
Uh, if all the burden is on us to know what product is good, what media is good, what politician is good, I think there should be standards,
Hmm.
and where we just simply know media is telling us the truth.
Hmm.
And so part of this, the we can go, well, yeah, that's pie in the sky, Kinder. That's so idealistic and utopian. And my argument is that it's time for us, if we create a vision and we all hold that vision together, just as you were saying, we believe in the freedom of the press, we believe in the freedom of truth, we believe in scientific accuracy, and if we create a vision all together, and then we go to the politicians or whatever and we say, we've got it. And it's time that you guys deliver it. We don't want to compromise on these things anymore. It's time for you to make these things happen. And given the dangers that we find ourselves in, the ongoing wars all over the world, the dramatic difference from between rich and poor, the surveillance issues, the earth issues, that it's time for us to make our systems so we don't have to be fighting around all this stuff. Let's
Right.
make systems work.
Okay, so if I'm trying to kind of make sure I understand what you're saying. So, we actually have the Food and Drug Administration, which actually has a set of standards that actually say, whether food or drugs or whatever are okay for us to consume,
Right.
because they could actually pose physical harm to us. Yet, some of the media could actually charge come to harm us, and maybe not like we're not going to die from.
Right.
Well, maybe we would. I don't know. But, media doesn't have that level of a potential harm, nor does the government have any say on that. And I think what you're saying is like, what would happen if there was systematic requirements that media
Yeah.
actually had? They did pre-Reagan, right? I think they
They,
did.
they, there was more of it pre-Reagan. There
Yeah,
was.
and I can't remember what he did.
Yeah.
He did something. There was
It was
some
over. Yeah.
regulation that he changed, right? Do you remember what it was?
I don't recall. I've come across it and I've got, that's it. That's where it started.
Yeah, that's where it
Um,
started. Because, I
yeah.
remember the days of Walter Cronkite,
Yeah.
where
There
we'd
you
watch the news and you're like, that guy I believe. There's no way that what he's saying is
go.
not the truth. But
That's
we
right.
somehow have lost that. So you're asking for systems and structures that would actually give us more confidence. Because, I mean, just voting nowadays, it's
Yeah.
like, oh, it's time to vote. And then I spend hours and looking through the literature, reading stuff online, reading various opinions of people. I do try. I mean, it takes an extraordinarily long time, and maybe it should. But I think most people wouldn't spend as much time. They would just like, I like that guy's picture. Check.
Yeah. Right. Well,
So
unfortunately, this is a media thing as well.
yeah, that's
Unfortunately,
what I'm saying. There's the media is not to like I don't know. Seattle Times says that, but I don't know.
well, and political advertising, that's media as well.
Yeah,
And all that is just big money spending, blaring out what a bad person this particular person
right.
is.
Yeah,
And it's a horrible thing inside of us to be voting based on that kind of marquee, that kind of
right.
advertising.
So I'm curious. So you had this financial crisis. It kind of made you actually felt like somehow I think you said personally responsible or hurt or whatever from for or like you were a representative of this industry that had maligned the public in so many ways. And So you wrote this book as a way to address that. You actually have a model in which the model is that we become more mindful, and then you've also spread it out to other people. So I'm curious to see what kind of conversations are happening. What makes you feel inspired about the conversations that have been happening across the country?
Yeah. What the structure of the conversations is very similar to the structure that I introduced called life planning in the
Mm-hmm.
financial world,
Mm-hmm.
and there's an acronym to it called evoke,
Mm-hmm.
and it is very similar to that. You can find that in all the books that I've written, something about it, and in that model, what we do for a client is we create a vision for their life. I mean, they give it to us. We just listen well. So the first thing we do is we really listen. Then we create this amazing vision that the client is so inspired by that they don't hold back from doing what they've always longed to do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And they live on fire. Their entrepreneurial energy comes out. They get very excited and passionate about life. So that's what life planning is. So my thought was, let's do that for civilization. Let's get these
Mm-hmm.
groups together all over the world.
Um,
Let's have each group create an inspiring vision,
mm,
go on and deliver things. So we've now seen well over 100 conversations that are structured, and we've got on our website, we've got the structure. We give instructions how to do it. It's very simple, and it's kind of three flip charts, and we just go through them. And you go from the vision, which is beautiful, to what are the obstacles? What could get in the way? And
okay.
then, people come up with, fear and greed. They come up with the internal stuff, unconsciousness, laziness. And then they come up with, well, political corruption, big money, the media. So they come up with the obstacles. So you have the vision, then we have the obstacles. And then we go, okay, so these are good. And we weigh them so that each community places a particular emphasis on one or another one. And so that's where I'm beginning to get hopeful because the communities are kind of voting and then they're taking action. And that's the next thing. We go, okay, what are the actions that we would need to take, either nationally, locally, globally, or right with this group? And the actions get listed. And then we go, okay, who's willing to make a commitment? What commitment are you willing to make to change these things? And people go, well, I'm going to do one more act of kindness a week,
Hmm.
or I'm going to take a little bags of food for homeless. I'm in the inner city a lot, and I'm going to take around bags of food and I'm going to have them ready whenever they come up. Or in the political season, they say, I'm going to go write a bunch of postcards, you
Hmm.
know, and I'm going to try and get my candidate more attention. Or we have one of the things that's really cool, CJ. In England, there's one group that's met now 7 times. That's the longest, that's the most number of times any group's met so far. And they're designing a manual of wisdom.
Hmm.
And it's to be taught starting at age 6 and going all the way to 96. So
Wow.
by age, and then that part of it is a corporate. How do we do this in our institutions?
Hmm.
So first it's by age layer, and then it's by institution, corporate government, nonprofit, all the rest. Because the issue is, why don't we have wisdom all the way through all of our institutions? That's one of the things that's really strange
Mm-hmm.
about where we've come in civilization. We've got entrepreneurship, we've got incredible capitalist stuff happening, but wisdom at the top and filtering down, not much.
Hmm. Okay, so
Um,
I know this is kind of a hard sell, but tell me, help us come up with a vision. All right, so a vision for life. So can you walk us through maybe the first step, and I'll try to come. Is that too long to do?
oh no, I'll do it. So what would you
Okay.
see? Let me just ask you, what if you were, so go out 1,000 years. We're
Okay.
there. We've
Okay.
arrived.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Find go into a meditative place, find yourself quiet for a few moments,
Mm-hmm.
and then imagine that we've actually arrived. We dodged that bullet of the early 21st century, and we're there.
Okay.
So what's it like? What do you experience? What's it like?
I can't remember the name of the movie, but it's the closest thing that I thought this would be pretty cool if it were. But it's fairly a lot of peace. It has kind of a Star Trek feel where it's like lots of tech, lots of you know clean air, um, people living vibrant lives. Um, And then people who are more conscious, more peaceful, teaching consciousness at an early age for little kids. Um, yeah, where people, have everyone is has food. Everyone has food. Everyone has the same privileges and ability to thrive and live. That would be mine.
That is, it's so beautiful. That's really beautiful,
Yes.
and it really is, and it's very similar to what I hear all over the world.
Is
Uh,
that because we actually have seen too many movies that have the same kind of thing? Like, do we lack creativity? I mean, the
I,
thing I had to do is come up with a movie. Like, that's sad.
I mean, it's kind of cool that you came up with that, but I think it's because we're all human beings,
Hmm.
and so we know we want clean air because we can smell and go, no, that's not right,
Right.
and we know we want our kids, to be happy and peaceful. We want peace. That's just inside of us, I think. So
Hmm.
I think we're just the same,
Right.
basically.
Yeah, we all want that. That's why when I read through, I'm like, it seems like these are just obvious, but yet they're not obvious because we're not doing them.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's like a visioning process, and so what's interesting is you're saying people come up with very similar kinds of ideas because they're human divine truths, I would say,
Yeah.
human truths. And so then it would be what are the obstacles for making it happen? And as I was going through, I was the main obstacle that I came up with when I was reading the book was, and this is one that I just face every day because of my view, which
Yeah.
is tantric Shaivite rule, which
Well,
is that well, I am looking at the reality and how can I accept this reality as is? Like, how can I see the things that I see that initially upset me as potentially needed challenge to make me and society grow? And so there's this kind of striving for more, but then also accepting what is, which I'm assume is very, very Buddhist as well, which is your background. So, how have you made peace with that tension of, this is kind of truth, an internal truth that we have, yet there is the reality of what exists today. How have you made peace with that?
yeah, it's a beautiful question, and I think it's right at the heart of spiritual practice, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
it's really lovely, and that you bring it up, and um, the Buddha's main teaching was something he called the Four Noble Truths, and the way to enlightenment was called the Eightfold Path. And so, in that Eightfold Path, it's basically divided in half. I mean, there's a couple of items that are kind of wisdom items, but then three of them have to do with spiritual practice,
Mm-hmm.
and three of them have to do with our engagement in the world.
Mm.
So it's similar to what you're saying, and but different, of course. It's a different tradition. So our engagement in the world, he talks about as what's most important is that we do right speech, right action, and right livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
And largely that's a lot of kindness. There's a lot of acceptance in there, but it's a lot of kindness, but it's also engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Because each of those things you're doing something, you're
Mm-hmm.
moving out into the world. And what I realized was that he taught 2,500 years ago. And I thought they didn't have democracy then.
Right.
We have tremendous freedoms that are there because we participate in a democratic system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, he would probably have that right livelihood includes our obligation to each other to make that system strong.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and so I think that the spiritual side says when there's a screw up one way or the other, and you get really upset or you get fearful or whatever, you learn just as you did driving in the car. You know how to come to a place of peace because there's no point in just being insane about it.
Right.
But at the same time, whenever you have an opportunity to engage, where it doesn't drive too much your neuroses nuts, right? That you engage thoughtfully. I think that one of the things that he would have taught us would have been speak truth to power,
Mm-hmm.
because then we no longer have this dependency that we have on government, on corporations, on anything that's more powerful than we are. We know that we're the ones. This is the truth. You and I, our spiritual nature, we are the ones that this earth is made for, that these institutions are made for. And we need to speak to that
Right.
and with that understanding inside ourselves.
Right. Versus being at the whim of, I mean, you can watch your news and feel completely depressed because it's
Oh,
like, how are things ever going to change? It seems like
yeah.
every country, our country, other countries, everything is just literally falling apart, and it's hard to feel hopeful aside from that. Sometimes things have to
Yeah.
dissolve and evaporate before we
Yeah.
come back and reconstitute into something better, but we have to see the most horrific thing to know what's better. I mean, I just wish we didn't have to go through this, but at the
Well,
same time, it is what it is, right?
one of the things that is that I'm seeing, you asked, I think earlier, what did I see that was hopeful? I think you asked that,
Yeah.
and these every single conversation, every single community that's gotten together and held one of these conversations have left those conversations inspired, hopeful, and action oriented.
That's great. Well, I think it's part of the, like you said, the community part is huge, right? To engage and feel like you can make a difference.
Yeah.
We've been talking to George Kinder about his book, Envision, A Golden Civilization, The Map of Mindfulness. So folks they can go to agoldencivilization.com
agoldencivilization.com.
and
Yep.
then and it will give you all the materials to start your own conversation in your own location. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below or to subscribe to the show or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.